So this is my third video on for loops, and I'm going to use a scanner and get some user input. And if you're just learning for loops, you should probably go back to my first two videos to understand them a little bit better. But in this game, or in this class, I'm going to create a situation in a game where the user is going to choose how many times they roll a die, how many times they roll a six-sided die. So what I need to do here is, first of all, create an integer that's going to keep track of what the outcome is on a die. Okay, so die roll. Okay, I'm going to call that die roll. So the number that comes up when I roll a six-sided die. And I also have a video on random numbers. If you'd like to understand what I'm about to do a little bit better, you could look at that. But to do that, what I'm going to do is six-sided die. I'm going to go 6 times math.random. Okay, that's going to give me a random number between 0 and 6. It is not going to include 6, though. The next step in this is to add 1 to that outcome, because now I would be between 1 and 7, not including the 7. And I want to take that number that I have there, and I'm going to cast it as an integer. Now, if you don't know about integers or casting into integers or casting data types, and I also have a video on casting that you should watch to better understand what that's doing. Now, just as a quick test, I am going to output die roll to see and just verify that I'm getting numbers 1 through 6 and that it's looking like it's somewhat fair here. Now, I am getting a lot of 6s, but as I roll more, I should get all these other numbers. And it appears to be working, and I do know that this is going to work correctly here. So, I have a successful die roll, and that's all it takes to roll a die one time. But now, what I really want is, I want to know how many times the user wants to roll the die. That's what I want. So, what I'm going to do is, I am going to define die roll as one roll, and there's no problem there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a for loop that's going to actually run or roll the die a certain number of times, whatever the for loop is told. So the first thing I need to do is ask the user how many times they want to roll the die. So I need to ask them, let's see, how many times should I roll the die? Okay, now I like to take off the new line on my print statement here because I like for the output to wait right here when the output occurs. Otherwise, my cursor blinking and my paused and the output is on the next line, and I don't like that. I'll explain that when I run this program. But how many times should I roll the die? Now, in order to get the user's input, I need to set up a scanner. And guess what? I have another video on scanners. If you do not understand what I'm about to do, then you should probably go back and watch the scanner video to help you understand the scanner and how it's working. But I want a new scanner. I'm going to call this a get number, because the scanner is going to scan in what number the user types. And I need to create a new scanner. And scanners go system.in. Okay, and then in order to have the scanner work, if you're familiar, I need an import statement, java.util. And now my scanner is set up to get user input. Now, what I have set up at this point is I have a random number created. I have a scanner that can grab the user's number. I ask the user for how many times they want the die to roll. And now I need to grab what they type, so I need to actually use my scanner. I need to use my scanner. My scanner is called getNumber. Remember, you call it by name, just like you would call your pet. Okay, hey, getNumber, get on over here. And what I want you to do is I want you to get the next integer that the user types. Okay, now, what that will do is that will grab the number that the user types, and what I'd like to do is store it in memory. And so I'm going to have an integer here called I will call it user number, and whatever they type, whatever the user types, that's what this is. Grab what the user types and store it as user number. Now, what I would like to do next is whatever number the user types, I want a for loop to run that many times. And so I'm going to create a for loop. And my counter, my I counter, is going to equal 1. Okay, remember I have to initialize it though and declare it. I is going to equal to 1. Okay, that's my counter. Start at 1. As long as I is less than the user number, let's think about that for a minute. So let's go back to this code. I ask the user how many times they want to roll the die, and let's stick with a simple number. Let's say the user types the number 2, and so user number is 2. And I come down to the for loop, and this user number right here, remember, is 2. Now I want this code to run 2 times, and so it needs to run when I is 1, and it needs to run when I is 2. So this is going to operate as long as I is less than or equal to the user number. Now remember, if they typed in 2 here, then 2 minus 1 is 1. That's only one time it's going to run. Unless I put the equal in, then I have to get to 2. The equals adds an extra. So remember, the rule is subtract this number and this number, and if you've got an equal sign there, you add 1 back. Okay, so I need to also increment the I variable. And that's your standard for loop. Again, if that was too fast or not making sense, I do have 2 other videos on for loops that would explain that more slowly. Now, what I want to do is, I want this loop, which I have set up right now, to run as many times as the user asks for it to run. What I would like to do is I would like to display the die roll. And so this random die roll that I have here, I don't necessarily, as long as I'm not going to track the numbers, I don't necessarily need that statement anymore. Okay, so be a little bit careful, because sometimes people will do this. They'll put die roll here. But you have to understand that only one random number has been created here. Okay, it's going to be the same, and this roll here is going to print out the same number over and over and over again. And that's not really what I want. What I really want is I want this code, this die rolling code right there, I want it to occur, and I want to just print it out right here. I want to print out the answer to that question. And I'm going to remove this die roll at the bottom. So really what's going to happen is this loop is going to run as many times as the user asks. And every time it runs, we're going to print out some random number, 1 through 6. And so I will, see, I'll expand my code here, and let's see what happens when I run it. Okay, how many times, I notice I have a typo there, but how many times should I roll the die? And down in here, click in the window down here, I'm going to run it 3 times. We'll keep this simple, and notice it outputs 2, 4, 1. It outputs all 3 rolls for me. I'll run it again, just so I can show that it's doing what it should do. I'll run it 2 more times. So let's say I want to roll it twice, and I happen to get 2 2s. Now when that happens, I do like to run it again, just to kind of show people that I'm always, there's 3 3, that this code is not making a mistake. That was just coincidence that I got the same 2 numbers there. Now we can do a roll where we're going to roll it more times. Let's just say 5 rolls, and you can see there are my 5 rolls. You know, if you wanted to do something a little bit more difficult, and you wanted to actually not show those rolls, but you wanted to sum up all those rolls and just display the sum of them all, then you would have to go back into your code here, and you would have to create a variable called sum of dice or something of that nature, which I could do anywhere in this program. I'll work on it here just because it's a little bit more complex, and it adds a really nice feature to the for loop. Sum of dice, I'll call it that. And of course, I will start it at 0 just so that it's nothing. And now I initialized it outside of the for loop, so it is a global variable that I can use. Inside the for loop, though, I don't want to print out every die. Although, you know, in a game, if I just want the sum of the die, I'm not going to print out every die. But for this, I'm going to leave that there just so that at the very end of this program, we can verify that it's working correctly and that the sum truly is correct. So what we do here is have to adjust some things because I'm leaving that random number in there. Here's my random number generator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have to create that number before I do the output. So I'm going to create a new die roll, okay, and I'm going to set that equal to my random number. So I have here my random die roll, okay, and I can see that I have an error there, and it's because I had this die roll from the very beginning of my code that I had started with you. In fact, I don't need that anymore because my die roll is actually going to occur inside this loop. So the second the loop starts, we're going to roll a die. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our sum of dice and we are going to add that die roll because we want to add whatever that outcome is. Okay, and then in here I am going to print die roll because I just want to verify what each roll is. And so if I ask it to roll 3 dice, it's going to roll a dice and get a number. It's going to add that number to the sum, which was 0, and then it's going to print that roll for me. And this is really nice. And I know I haven't done the sum yet, but let's just run this and make sure that it's operating correctly. I'll roll 3 dice, and you can see there's my 3 dice. I'll run it one more time here. Maybe I'll roll it 4 times, and there's my 4 die roll, my 4 dice rolls. Okay, and so that's working great. It's doing the exact same thing that my last line of code did. It's just a little bit of extra code in here. But the reason I did it was because at the very end, what I'd like to do is dice total, and I would like to output what the total is on the dice. And then to do that, I could just do some text, display some text, and then add. Remember, I have this variable called sum of dice that I want to print. It's keeping track with the sum. It's very important to understand that sum of dice, again, was a global variable because it was initialized outside of the loop. So if it's a global and initialized outside the loop, it can be accessed inside the loop and changed, and all of the memory globally is changed. And therefore, at the very end of the program, I can access it, and there are no issues. And so I'm going to run this, and we can verify that it's operating correctly. We'll start with 2 just to make this easy. So my one die was 6 and one die was 3, and together they add to 9. And I'll run this, let's say 4 times to make this a little more complex. I have 4 dice that I rolled. I got a 1, a 6, a 3, and a 6. And they do add to 7, 10, 16, and there's a total of 16, so that the user doesn't have to do the math, and so that you also show them what each die roll is. And so there you have it. There's a nice little die rolling program where the user can determine how many times they roll the die.